Thank you so much for inviting me to share some of the experience we have in working with fish. I've called the topic Nourishing Millions in India and the Potential of the Fishery Sector. This is a relatively new area in which people are beginning to work, in that when you talk about nourishment, the fisheries sector and fish is a bit overlooked by many nations, and especially in India, there is now a growing interest in looking at the fisheries sector as a potential both for improving livelihoods, incomes, and the food and nutrition security of people. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So Worldfish has worked quite a lot in fish producing countries, and we've done quite a lot of work in Bangladesh, in countries in Africa with the Great Lakes, where fish is an important part of the diet, in the Pacific and in South Asia, Bangladesh especially, and Cambodia. When we started working in India, there were many who would ask us, but why would you focus on fish in India? That's not a very important food group in India. But that is not so. If you look at this figure, which has been developed by the national government of India, there's quite a lot of people in India who work within the fisheries sector, and quite a lot who also have fish as part of the diet. I've called my presentation Nourishing Millions, because if you would just take the population groups of West Bengal, Odisha, and Assam, just to take three, not even taking the South India, then there are many, many millions of people who depend on fish, as I said, for both livelihoods and income, but certainly as an integral part of their nutrition. The issue is for many, especially the poor and vulnerable, that the frequency of consumption and the amounts that are consumed are very, very low. And if you want to have a contribution towards better nutrition and better health, the consumption must be higher. Next slide, please. So if we would look at what is it, the contribution of fish and other aquatic foods to nutrition. What many do not know is that they talk about that fish is talked about as a source of protein. But here I want to focus and highlight the importance of fish as contributing towards essential micronutrients. So if you look at vitamin A, animal source foods, including fish, has the only preformed source of vitamin A as retinol. And in addition, fish has a very highly bioavailable source of vitamin A in the form of dehydroretinol, and that's only for fish. Vitamin B12, which is extremely important for brain development and cognition. Animal source foods, including fish, are the only dietary source of B12. Likewise, so you have many other multiple micronutrients, including iron and zinc and calcium and selenium and iodine, many of which in population groups of India are in deficiencies. Next slide, please. Christina alluded to the malnutrition rates in South Asia. And if we would just look at these four countries, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, we can see, of course, with the population size that India has, you have large numbers of undernourished children. Likewise, children who are stunted, meaning their growth is too low for their age, and women in the reproductive age who suffer from anemia. So if we would look back to the slide I just showed about the contribution of micronutrients and the contribution that fish can make in diets, then you have the potential for the fishery sector for addressing some of the micronutrients and malnutrition issues that are facing South Asia, including India. Next slide, please. There have been some studies, not many, but few mega studies across nations that look at the effect of fish on different aspects of growth and development, nutrition and health. And the evidence from these meta-analyses show that fish in diets can improve brain development and cognition, reduces mortality and morbidity, is associated with reduced stunting in children, and in studies, and this is not a mega-analysis, this is only in the this study is only from the United States. It is associated with long-term weight loss in adults. And we know now, if we look, we know now in India, as in many countries, there's a pandemic of overweight and obesity. And we've seen this and heard about this, for example, with respect to the COVID-19 crisis that we now face. So increased fish, back to this, increased fish consumption would contribute to better growth and development in children, a well-nourished and healthy adolescents and adults. And this is important, and again, related to the COVID-19 crisis we face now, with that a well-nourished adult population and a well-nourished elderly population, where you can boost the immune systems, would have an effect on people, on their on the way they react to a disease as COVID-19. And on the other hand, you also have a better school performance in children, better work performance, and the intergenerational benefits, meaning that a well-nourished child grows to become a well-nourished adult, a well-nourished woman gives birth to a well-nourished child, and thereby having a nourished nations and using fish to contribute to nourishing nations would lead to the overall development of a nation, both in terms of its population, but also in terms of its economy. Next slide, please. So now I want to present some of the approaches that we've used in order to increase fish consumption. And we focused on the first 1,000 days of life in pregnant and lactating women and in children. And most of this work stems from what we've done in Bangladesh. So we know that fish is a perishable item. We also know that fish takes time to both clean and to prepare. So we are looking for ways of having tasty, well-accepted products which are convenient to use. And one of the products we have quite a lot of success with is developing a fish chutney for pregnant and lactated women. And it's quite a simple product in that it builds on the mango chutney, and with removing the mango and using dried small fish instead, where you can have a chutney that can be used as a condiment it's ready to eat, and you can use it as a condiment in the main meal of women. And the calculations show that a heaped tablespoon of chutney will give you a tremendous boost in micronutrients contribution, as well as energy and essential fatty acids from the oil in the chutney. Next slide, please. In Cambodia, we've worked with the government of Cambodia and UNICEF, and building on, again, a convenient product and using the fish from the rice field fisheries. A private company whom we partner with has received a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they are developing fish powder products for malnourished children to be used by UNICEF and by the government of Cambodia. And what has been important in this journey is that UNICEF has agreed that milk powder in products for treatment of malnourished children can be replaced 100% with fish powder based on the attributes of fish and the contribution of fish to multiple micronutrients. Next slide, please. The fish powder, we have promoted fish powder in many countries across the countries in where we work, in Africa, in Asia, and the Pacific. And this is again based on small fish, which are more affordable than big fish, small fish having diverse micronutrients, and drying these and making it into a fish powder, which has a shelf life of over 6 months. And it's already roasted, so you can add it to the complementary foods of children and to the foods, or to the family foods. So it's a product that can improve the nutritional contribution to the diets of different population groups. In Odisha, we've started to work with the state government of Odisha. Now, we've been working with them now for the last 3 years. And many of the approaches that we have used in Bangladesh, in Cambodia, in Myanmar, in some of the African countries, we are now using in Odisha. And what has been really very interesting in Odisha is that we have been able to work with the government across the food systems. So we are working within the production systems of pond polyculture, wetlands, and very interestingly, with self-help women's group who are using the village tanks to produce fish, both large fish for sale and small fish, which they use for consumption. And again, what has been extremely interesting in Odisha is that we very quickly were able to establish a collaboration across different sectors, with the fisheries sector and with the health and nutrition sector and the women's development sector. So the fish that's being produced, and also from the coastal areas, from the captive fisheries, are now being used for drying, for producing safe dried fish, which are used in the Angawati centers for mother and children, and also in schools for feeding children. We haven't yet done any efficacy studies to see what effects this has on school performance or on work performance. That we hope to do in the future. But we know from the attributes of fish and the nutrient composition of the fish, we know that how increased consumption of fish can also increase the can improve the nutritional status of those who consume fish. But interestingly, with the women's self-help groups, it's across the board. So we are also looking at the effect of the production of fish in the village tanks on their income and livelihoods. And with producing the fish products for the Angawati centers and for the schools, it's also women who are engaged in drying the fish and in packaging the fish that are used in these programs. So we are extremely interested to see how this plays out in Odisha and how we can move the experience from Odisha to Assam, where we already are working, and to other fish producing states in India, and thereby have the effect of fish for nourishing the millions in India. Thank you.
Thank you so much,